Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I produce this podcast and I'm also the leader of the Preston Lib Dems. And we are revisiting a topic that we did years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when me and Richard Kemp were doing it without the wonderful visual aid of actually filming this podcast, where we're talking about canvassing. This is your 101 guide to canvassing. And with me today, we have Sam Al-Hamdani, who is another very experienced canvasser who enjoys it. But we also have Alison Bennett, who we'll say is a reluctant kind of converted canvasser. So we want this to be a really good guide to let you know why you should canvass, how you should canvass, when you should canvass, and where you should canvass. So this is going to be a really good guide for you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, do let us know in the comments below. But I'll introduce both our panelists. Hello, Sam. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Nice to see you.
Yes, and we have promised Sam. Me and Sam are not going to over nerd this episode because we realise we do that. So we're on best behaviour. In fact, we'll get Alison, who's our other panelist, to ring a bell if we go over the board with the nerd thing. Hello, Alison.
Hello, John. Hi, Sam. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Gosh, yes. Has anyone got used to saying 2023 yet? Because I'm not. Right. So we're going to start off with why we should canvass. And a little bit of an explainer on this is because I am a full-on canvas convert. But Sam will talk us through, because we're only going to talk it briefly, because this is mainly going to be a practical thing of what you should do while you're canvassing. But it is important to give the reasons why people like myself advocate canvassing so much. And Sam, that's because all the data that the party collects, of which we are a very data-driven party, suggests that canvassing is the biggest indicator of likelihood to win, more than leaflets, social media, how many members you've got in the ward, your history of whether you've had Lib Dems in the ward. Canvassing is the number one indicator of whether you will win.
Because essentially it's about the best contact with a person. You know, face-to-face contact with somebody and having a conversation with somebody is the best way of them relating to you and you relating to them. It's the same if you're selling them something, which to some extent we are. It's just the most easy way for somebody to connect. And that's what we're trying to do, is build connections.
And Alison, obviously, we don't always, we're all councillors here and we all want to do a good job by helping our constituents, but canvassing is also about collecting data.
Yeah, it is absolutely about collecting data, and that helps us gain votes and know who we need to vote for us when we get to election time. But it's not just about data in the sort of sense of it being stored in databases on computers. It's also about what's in your head and what you understand about your residents and what issues they have that, you know, you should be trying to work to address. So yeah, bear both in mind. It's about that qualitative knowledge as well as the kind of hard sort of voting intent that we end up storing in databases.
I mean, Sam and Alison, I'll come back to you as well. To also some of the broad brush benefits of canvassing. I'll start this. It's also cost effective. Let's face it, for a cost of an out slip or a canvassing card, which for those that don't know, every time you canvass, you should actually. I've got one here. It's very useful. You should have a canvassing card from you, not only because it's legally compliant for your data that you're going to collect, but also if only a third of the people you canvass are going to be in, it means that no door is wasted. So this is one of our target candidates for next year. I will be going out canvassing later on today. Sam, any other benefits of canvassing?
I think it's also just the knock-on things for all the other campaigning that you do. You know, we've said it's important for that data, but if you're putting out leaflets, to know what you're going to put in that leaflet and who that leaflet is going to go to. I mean, some of the time, you know, you might be in a place where you don't have enough money to put leaflets out to everybody. And certainly there's going to be some of your marketing that you're not going to put out to everybody. So the more you have that information, the better the rest of your campaigning is.
Yeah, absolutely. Alison, any other benefits for you?
Yeah, I think it's about teams and people and bringing your campaigners together. Leafleting tends to be quite solitary. You tend to do it on your own, maybe listening to an excellent podcast. But when you're canvassing, if you can get a team together and you go, right, we're going to go out for the next 2 hours, and then at the end we're going to meet here and have a drink, you're bringing people together and they're feeling like they're in a group activity rather than in a solitary activity. And that makes campaigning more fun. And if people enjoy the time they're spending like helping the Lib Dems, then they're more likely to spend more of their time doing it.
And one of our councillors who was fairly new to the party, he got elected in 2019, having fairly recently joined. And he said he sometimes, particularly during COVID, it was a little bit in the doldrums and felt a little bit down. And actually going out in a canvassing team in the North Shropshire by-election, as it was, he said he really felt a part of something, like he was doing something to make a change. And I think, so if you can work in teams, that's obviously very recommended. The only other kind of benefit I like from canvassing is at some point, as a politician, someone's going to have a go at you. That is the nature of the whether that's an opponent or someone doesn't like what you've done, but particularly if it's an opponent and say, and particularly, I mean, Sam will talk about, he's been in a very aggressive area and been in some very cutthroat battles. If someone said to you, that Sam is a right so-and-so, such and such, one of the biggest ways you can diffuse that is if that resident's met you and says, actually, I spoke to Sam and actually he's lovely. There you go. So that might not. I should put disclaimer. I have no idea if Sam is lovely. If you have been canvassed by Sam and realise he isn't, I do apologise. But they're I think the main benefits. Sam,
just the other thing, because we're all counsellors, and there's probably lots of the amount of casework that you get through doing that, and there's just doing something to fix something for someone is great for them. It really feels good for you. Like, it's so nice to fix something for someone, and a lot of the time people don't think of telling a counsellor, just generally, people don't necessarily think of getting in touch. And if you turn up on their doorstep at the right time, you'll get things mentioned to you that you wouldn't have got otherwise. And it's such a good feeling when you're able to fix something for someone.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point, Sam, because actually I've always been of the opinion, the better you are as a community campaigner, the better you are as a counsellor. Because actually, if you're getting out and on the door, you'll meet loads of people that are suffering in silence. And actually, by knocking on their door, you find issues and fix them, and it makes you a better all-round kind of council and public representative. And I think, and it also, you'll find people who, I mean, a very sad case I had was I knocked on this chap's door. I had knocked on several times over the last 12 years and noticed he wasn't quite the same as what he was. And in the end, they were... he's in his 90s. He had now required help from social services. And I happened to bump into his daughter. And because of that meeting and because of canvassing, they were suffering in silence. And now actually they're getting help. So there's a very real good thing about doing it as well. And no amount of leaflets, social media will have that effect as you taking that 5 minutes or however long you take on the door, which we'll get to go and talk to that person. Right, we will move on to who we should canvass. Now, a really good starting point for this, if you haven't already watched it, is our Targeting 101 that we did not so long ago, because it does talk about what kind of people you should be concentrating with your campaigning, and that's whether that's direct mail or canvassing. But Sam, from a broad point of view, my broad statement would be that you start wide in the summer, and then you narrow as you get closer to elections.
Yeah. And obviously that's going to differ for different people who are listening to this, because you have different campaign periods. You know, some people listening to this have an election every 4 years, whereas some people have, pretty much an election every year. I mean, there was a period we were having a general election every year, but, if you are on, as I am, we have 3 councillors in my ward and we elect every year with a gap 1 year. But then we probably will get a general election in that gap. You know, we've got a very different window for what that broad window is. So we've got maybe 3 months where we do kind of broad, everybody kind of quite deep conversations. And then we'll narrow it down until when we get to election time, we're pretty much talking to sort of the people we know that need to vote, just go and do it. And the people we know we need to swing to us, make sure they swing, and that's it.
Alison?
Yeah, the situation for us here is we've got a number of seats that we won in 2019 unexpectedly, having not targeted them. I'm one in one of those seats, as it happens. And so we basically won a bunch of seats without much data to back it up. And so the challenge then is how we go about holding those seats when they come up without the data. And the goal really is to try and fill in those data gaps as much as we can. So we build the list of voters we know are sort of maybe disposed to vote towards us. So before Christmas, for example, we spent a period of time talking to people that we just haven't got any data on at all, but we know that they vote in local elections. We've now sort of sat forward at the beginning of January, and we're now looking at a broader list of everybody that we know, and we've kind of got a funneling plan going forward through to May.
Yeah, because unless your team has unlimited manpower, which, let's face it, you're Lib Dem, so you don't, you will have to triage your efforts and concentrate your efforts into your priority areas. Whether that's, again, we talked a lot about this on the targeting episode, whether it's people you know who vote, postal voters, a particular part of the ward that has a much higher turnout, or a particular part of the ward where an issue is really prevalent. So all those things come into it. And I suppose the other hints we might have regarding who you should canvass, I put a particular shout out if you have new builds in your areas. At some point, because some of them, it takes a while for new build residents to start really getting into the groove of what they want to see in their community. So for me, I always think it's worthwhile hitting them fairly regularly, even if they haven't got a past voter record, because they're still getting to know you. And also canvassing regularly, as if you're the first person they see in new build properties, that's a wonderful first impression, and you'll find that puts you well ahead of the opposition. The other hint I'll get is if someone has lived in your ward for 20, 30 years and has never voted, you have to be honest with yourself, are you going to get them to vote this time? It doesn't mean you represent all people in your patch, or you hope to represent all people in your patch, but as you start getting close to that polling day, that person should not be a priority for your time. Any other hints, Alison?
No.
That's right. Okay.
I wasn't expecting that.
on Sam, any other further hints on who we should canvass?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. And just, you will know if you are campaigning in your area, like you will, even if you've not got sort of written down targets, because let's face it, very few of us have the level of kind of plans that we would ideally like to have, but you will have a feel for it. You'll just, so if you don't have all those written out plans, like trust your gut a bit and just kind of think sensibly about where do I feel I need to go and speak to? Just, take your own kind of advice.
Right, perfect. Let's move on to our third topic, which is when we should canvass. Now, some people, there's debates on some people, and Alison, you mentioned it before, and this was a question someone asked you, that someone said, would you ever do it on a Sunday? Would you ever do it on in an evening in November when it's darker? I'll start with you, Alison. What are your views on when we should canvass?
So I have no issues with canvassing on a Sunday. I think I first canvassed in the Richmond by-election, which was the tail end of 2016, I think. And I think since then, I can remember one conversation on a Sunday when somebody said, you shouldn't be here on a Sunday. And that was it. So it really rarely comes up. I tend not to canvass on a Sunday morning because people tend to lie in, be in their pajamas, or might be at church. But I think Sunday afternoon's absolutely fine. In terms of daylight, personally, I don't really I won't go out canvassing when it's dark. I like it to be daylight, kind of from a personal safety point of view. But I also think we've got quite a lot of elderly people in Sussex, and they're not used to their doors being knocked on, some of them, after dark. And I think it's quite worrying for them. And they're surprised enough to find a politician on the doorstep in broad sunshine. So in the dark, I think it's probably a step too far for us here.
Sam, you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything in that. I think there's two most important things for me in terms of choosing when to canvass, and it's when is it easy for you to do it? Like, there's no point organising canvassing for a time that's awkward, especially for like who's your most engaged canvassers. Like, I went out canvassing the other week with Hannah Kitchen, and she's just organised. She's gone, I've got time available here and here. I'm just going to do those sessions because I know it's gonna happen. If I try too hard to just make it work for someone else, I'm making it difficult for me. So just choose that kind of practical thing for you. And also that practical thing for the people you're knocking on the door of. Just then we talked about kind of, people might be in church. There's the wards, not my ward is quite sort of white Christian, but the ward next to me is very Muslim. So like, think about when people are going to be at mosque. If a large proportion of your people are not going to be there at the time, then just see if you can do it differently. And there are, you can get figures on. I know I tend to canvass during the day, and in areas of my ward, my out rates are higher because if lots of people are at work, then I'm just not going to get them. But actually, in the areas where there's more retired people canvassing during the day, I get a higher in rate. So it's, when is it easiest for you, and when is it likely to be easiest for the people you're talking to?
I mean,
can I jump in, John, with something else? Thought of. The other thing that we've done, and it's about us as a team in our branch holding each other accountable, is that we've now agreed that these are the times when some of us will be canvassing between now and the elections in May. So it's in one village on a Tuesday between 11 and 1, and another village on a Thursday between 11 and 1, and then 2 hours in one village on a Saturday morning and 2 hours in the other village on a Saturday afternoon. And those are now blocked in the calendar through till May. There isn't the expectation that everybody's going to come to every session. Lots of people won't be able to, but it just means that we've blocked it out. We're not going to book other things in there. And there's a kind of group accountability thing that, by mutually committing to that, it's a bit like trying to get yourself to go for a run. If you agree to go for a run with a mate, you're more likely to go for the run than if you're saying, well, maybe I'll go by myself. So try and build a team that has committed to it, and then you're more likely to get it to happen.
Go on, Sam.
Well, I just so as well, there's that thing of, you've got sort of regular time each kind of week. We also have, so we've got a new candidate in the area who's a teacher. And so we've actually, for his area, we've done something completely different, because he can't canvass during the day at all. But when it comes to holiday time, he's really available. So we just went out for the first week in January every single day for a week and absolutely blasted areas. And so we knocked on over 700 doors in a week. And so his, that was really effective for him. So it's not just the time of the day, it's also like what fits into your kind of big calendar almost. Yeah.
And for me, I generally don't canvass on a Sunday, not because I think I have no problem with canvassing on Sunday at all, in terms of, and again, I wouldn't do it before midday because you're just getting in people's way. But for me, when I look at my data over the last, I think about 12 years I've been using Connect, maybe 10 years, I worked out that I probably get about a 35% in rate on a weekday, either at late afternoon or evening, and it drops to maybe 25%, maybe 20% on a Saturday or a Sunday. And so whether that's as best use of my time, as opposed to, can you get out literature instead? Can you get out your focus leaflets or your letters instead at a weekend? But saying that, though, one of the good things, if there are more people available, so again, similar to what Alison said, we had a buddy up system where we have, one target ward with a held ward, and let's work them together. And it gets, and again, it's all that whole gym buddy kind of system that Alison was talking about. And then we had to have action days every other Saturday. Under the proviso, not everyone will make every action day, but it kind of gets people out. And even though if the turnout rate on a Saturday isn't as good, it is that kind of combined effort, everyone feeling part of it. And you go out and have a cup of coffee or a cake or a beer afterwards. It's that kind of thing as well. So, because other things to consider, I know it sounds tough. If it's a weekend and it's absolutely stunning weather, chances are people won't be at home. And again, think about, can I do something else as opposed to knocking on? Because you might be thinking, it's beautiful, it's the perfect time to go canvassing. Actually, a fairly miserable grey day is almost the perfect. You don't want it chucking down when you're canvassing because you look like you're bonkers. Although, again, we've all done that. It's particularly the 2019 general election. But actually, a miserable overcast day is almost the perfect weather to go out and canvass. And also, we haven't talked about time of year. Well, Sam touched on it a little bit. I have no problem with canvassing in the dark. Again, know your wards. If there's a really high concentration of pensioners in a particular patch, you wouldn't go them at night in winter. However, I do point out that at some points of winter, it's getting dark by 3:30. So I give myself a cut-off. If it's before 7 o'clock, even though it's dark, I generally think most people will be all right with that. And I have had very few other kind of complaints about that over all the years I've been doing it. The only other hint I can give, if you are doing something like a petition or you've got a target letter going out about a particular issue, getting that target letter out and then canvassing either later that day or later that week is a really powerful way of combining the issue so you get it. That's a useful thing to think about when you think about when. Sam?
Oh, just and the inverse of that as well. Somebody suggested this to me recently, and I thought, what a brilliant idea. When you have gone out canvassing, send a letter out after the canvass to everyone and say, these are the issues that were brought up round here, and this is what we're doing about it. Just to kind of go, it makes people realise you listened.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Anything further before we move to how we should canvass, which is by far the bigger section that we've got, because there's lots and lots of issues to cover here. Then we had a little chat before we started recording about some of the issues that come up, and these are issues that come up no matter where in the country you are. There's always similar things, and similar people who are new to canvassing have concerns about. I suppose, Sam, the first thing we should talk about is that the vast majority of people now are probably on the minivan canvassing app. So do you just want to give people a little bit of brief? I think if people don't know what the minivan app is, we are not going to tell you how to do it here. That's way too intense for this podcast, but there's lots of resource from HQ and from the ALDC to do it. But Sam, just a brief introduction about the minivan app.
Yes, we have a huge database. You don't need to know anything about that. You just need to know that on your phone, somebody can send you a list and it will have a series of questions on and a list of people. And you click onto the person, it shows you the questions and you can just tick it or write something in. It's really, really straightforward for someone to use at the end. And that data then goes straight back into the system and is really easy to use. I think a lot of people are nervous about it, but actually just using it once and you'll go, oh, there was nothing difficult to that. There is nothing technical about using it, which is really good.
I suppose, Alison, if you are not comfortable on the minivan app, one of the ways that you can get around it is if you have a team of people, find one person with the app who can run what we used to be like the board formula of canvassing, where you have one person who tells you, go see Mrs. Bloggs here, then go see Mr. Smith there. They can input and use the app while you go out and just do the door knocking.
Yeah, so that's what we were doing yesterday. We've got a candidate who was very involved as a candidate before I was involved in the Lib Dems. For various reasons, he's stepped back and he's now come back again and he's standing in May. But he'd never used minivan before until yesterday, and he hadn't put it on his phone. And he actually said he was quite nervous about using an app and standing on somebody's front door with a mobile phone in his hand, and it's sort of like an invasion of privacy. Anyway, we talked through it. And basically we ran the board a bit like you just said, John. So I'd tell him, go and talk to Mrs. Bloggins, and then he'd come back and tell me what the outcome was. However, the good news was that when we got home again afterwards, he messaged me to say he's now downloaded minivan onto his phone, and I'm hopeful that that's a sign that he's now comfortable using minivan himself and doesn't see it as sort of an intrusion into individuals.
I will say, I've only ever canvassed really using minivan. That's just when I started canvassing. I never have it out in front of people when I'm on so I'll look at the person who I'm going to go and knock on the door of. My phone goes away, and during the conversation, it will only come out if if it's relevant. So if they're talking about a specific problem, then it's a good way of emphasizing how much you're taking. I mean, it makes it easier for you, but it also emphasizes for them, right, I'm engaged with you. Can I just write down exactly what you're saying? What's the best way of getting back to you about it? And just recording it right there. So it becomes an aid to engagement rather than something that's getting in the way of engagement.
Yeah, I do exactly the same. It's sort of never there. And then once I've finished and I've walked down the road, then I've kind of put in any information I've got.
Yeah. And I suppose the only other thing with minivan, it will happen, and just be prepared that you've got your door, you've got, like, okay, I'm going to go see, it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm going to go to their door, you knock on the door, and I say, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. No. That will happen at some point. People move away, people die, people, sometimes the data's just, or sometimes they've got someone living with them. Now, we'll get into how we introduce ourselves in a second, but I would always use their name to start off with, because you need to know, again, it's about good data, that the person you are getting a response from is that person on the door, because, you get to know your residents a lot, especially when you've been, some parts of my ward I've knocked on, several dozen times over the last 12 years. But you always want to just make sure you are actually speaking to Mrs. X or Mr. Y. And if you say, oh no, he doesn't live here anymore, again, that's a way for you to say, actually, there's on your minivan app, and if you don't know how to do this, it's pretty easy, of marking down, actually they've moved away. Actually, and you'll also find, going back to the new homes issue, that some of them might not yet be on the register. And so you'll see, if you go to a new homes estate, and you think, okay, that house is clearly occupied, but there's no one on the register, I still knock on that door, even though I can't get direct data from it. I'll knock on that door, introduce myself, hi, welcome to the area, hope everything's all right. And if they are really positive, or there's really pertinent information come on, make a note on your phone, keep it in a notepad or something at your house, so you can, and then when they do come on the register, you can add that pertinent information. But that's very rare, and usually only with new build properties. Right, Sam, I'm going to talk to you. Branding, Lib Dem branding while you canvass. I think it's very important. What's your views on it?
I do think it's very important, and I tend to do things like this. I tend to brand myself up with colours more than necessarily the badge. So I'm kind of creating an association. I will wear badges. It also depends where I'm canvassing. If I'm canvassing, it's not in your face. I think if you wear a big rosette, it can just be a bit in your face, whereas that would be tucked under your arm and it's there, and it's. So if I'm canvassing somewhere I'm less familiar with, I'd be more likely to wear a Lib Dem badge. If I'm canvassing in my own ward, I'm more likely to use my face and gold.
I see. For me, I disagree with Sam. I always use my Lib Dem council badge. I don't wear a rosette. I only do that at elections. Although I do hang a rosette off my bag, weirdly enough, because people see it and they instinctively know it's something political, and they see the yellow. But I would always have a Lib Dem badge, just because one of the big things we're going to talk about during this episode is actually assumptions are a really dangerous thing in canvassing. And so don't assume people know who you are, even if they've met you before. Because they won't be thinking about you every day, all day. Alison, you be the breaker on this. Do you wear branding while you're going out canvassing?
Yes, I'm badge, not rosette.
Yeah.
And I keep going to Lib Dem Image and buying another pack of 10 Liberal Democrat badges, and then a pack of 10 Lib Dem councillor badges. And I've now got an order in for a pack of Lib Dem candidate badges for this spring. And then I take them all with me for an action day, and then everybody turns up and they haven't got their rosettes and their badges, and I hand them out and just keep them sort of badged up. I'm also very partial to a certain amount of yellow merchandise. Got my big orange coat. I've got a pair of sturdy winter boots with yellow elastic inserts. They're Chelsea boots. And yesterday I had my favourite yellow jumper on. So yes, it's a bit tragic, I have to admit.
I think the added thing, it's not just the person you're speaking to. And actually, this is a real benefit of being branded up. Like, if you're walking around as a group and you are seen as Lib Dems, the people that you're not talking to know that you're being active in their area.
Yeah. And it makes a good photo op as well, if you're all looking vaguely on brand.
Yeah, I mean, for the people that are listening, I do apologise. I did hold up. I have a bag in front of me called a delivery bag saying Preston Lib Dems, and we use these delivery because it's basically free advertising. You think about when brands, whether that's a takeaway chain that puts McDonald's logos on their bags because they want people to see that people are buying McDonald's products. There'll be lots of people who see you out and about who don't canvass or seen you on your way and think, oh, actually, brilliant, the Lib Dems, that John's out again, etc. So for me, I always, and like I say, we're going to get on to now actually how you then introduce yourselves on the door. Now, Sam, give us your best banter. So you have knocked on my door. How do you start your canvassing?
Hello, is it John? Hi, my name's Sam. I'm just out with the local Liberal Democrats, just finding out if there's anything we can help with or any problems around here we should be aware of.
Right.
And that's my opening kind of...
Sam's banter is almost identical to mine. And I mean, I'll ask Alison in a moment. What did you think of Sam's banter? So, what's your first impressions, Alison, of Sam's banter?
Friendly and personable. As a sort of, a more hesitant canvasser, I wonder how you get from there to finding out whether they're going to vote for you, Sam.
We will come to that. But one thing I think...
My other question, though, for both of you, and I'm interested in what you do, is when they open the door, are you asking whether who they are by their first name or by their surname, and then making an assumption, particularly with women, about whether they're a Mrs. or a Ms. or a Miss? What are you doing?
I always use, if it's a woman, I use their first name as well. Just because every time, well, not every time, that's a lie. Several times I've said, Ms. Collins or whatever. Sometimes their husband has passed away and they still like to be called Mrs. and things like that. But I just think if you say, hi, Lydia Thompson or whatever, I don't know where that name came from, it just did. But so the blokes are easy, I just say Mr. Oh, Mr. Smith, and particularly if you're speaking to one of them, and then the other one comes out. That's the way I kind of. Sometimes it's pretty obvious that it is just Mr. and Mrs. But I always use the woman's first name to avoid that issue. Sam,
I always go with first name just because it's always the same thing for me, and quite often you'll have 3 or 4 people in a house, and so you're trying to identify. It's not just which of the two is it? If there's 4 people, you need to know, is it Brian, Bob, Kevin, or Amanda? I mean, Amanda would probably stand out more, but I mean, you are trying to identify the specific person you're speaking to. And so I run off first names and it just seems easier. Unless if you just aren't going to have a clue, then I might even I might just introduce myself first and then ask which of the people they are.
Yeah. I think the only thing to think about in this, and this is going to sound, I mean, I'm not the best at pronouncing foreign names. And if you have if you're not sure, rather than absolutely making a scrambled egg of someone's name, and there's only one bloke and one lady, I'll say, hello, sir, hello, madam. That's how I kind of get over that, because sometimes I get myself a bit tongue-tied. And I feel almost like I'm going to insult them if I completely get their name wrong. So that is always a backup just in case. But the one thing I want to point out about what Sam's banter was at the start, one of the most important things for me is you made the canvassing about them, not about you. And I see so many rookie canvassers, particularly from the other parties. And there was a young Labour lad who was trying to take me out in one of my re-elections. We were on the same street, which is always annoying, but I was on the other side. He would knock on the door and says, hello, Mr. X, I'm such and such. Are you going to vote for me? They'd never met this guy before, and it was all about him. Sam's was, do you have any issues? We're doing our regular checks, just meaning if there's anything you want to report to us and help with, make it about them to start off with. And then you'll get to the politics stuff later on. But Sam, is that part of your reasoning for that?
Yeah, it's totally my reasoning for that. I would only switch away from those questions kind of when you're right at election time, or that's when I do. And there are, I find once they're talking, if you've got a dialogue going, it's much easier to conversationally steer it onto what I'll tend to go, then what's your motivation for voting? Or have you ever contacted us? Do you know who your local councillors are? So if they say, no, we don't have any problems, I would then kind of go into, I've got contact details here, canvas card, which we've just said before. Have you ever been in touch with your local councillors about this? Do you know what we can help you with? And once you're kind of engaged in that conversation, you can have a natural human kind of step through to getting that political information. I feel uncomfortable when it's not natural and human.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that, well, one of the biggest arguments against canvassing is that they're that the canvasser, the Lib Dem, isn't confident to do it. They're quite shy about it. So actually starting with a non-political, how are you doing kind of thing, is there anything we can help you with? You are not asking the political question. You're not asking something of that resident. You are seeing if you can help them. And actually one of the ways you can, if you are shy, is get a topic-based thing. So we're knocking on about setting up a no cold calling zone in this area. Is that something you might be in favour of, or what are your views on that? Do something that isn't party political to start off with, as a way of breaking into it, and again making it about the resident. Now, there was a question about how you do it, whether it's what I call peacetime, so outside the election period, to the actual election period. I generally don't change much, actually. I think when you get into the real meat of the election period, the residents already know. You know, the residents are already clued up. They know what's coming around the corner, either in a few days or a few weeks. So they realise why you're there. But it's not a bad thing to start off. Well, firstly, let's just check how you are. Is there anything you need to let me know about? Just a little sentence like that can really soften your into the conversation. What do you do, Alison?
At the moment, I would say, hello, is it Mrs. Smith? My name's Alison Bennett. I'm one of your district councillors. Knocking today to introduce myself and to see if you've got any local issues, and then pause and see what they say at that point. But on the names and how I address them, I vary it generally by age. And if I think that they're substantially older than me and they'll appreciate the sort of deference of a Mr. Mrs., then I will go with that. You know, if they're my age or younger, they're much more likely to get first name.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. And you know, it is about you are marketing yourself ultimately. And if it's a guy who I've met down at the rugby club and knows me a little bit personally, I might, once we get into the conversation, how's it going, mate, and stuff like that, and I have that kind of. If it's a slightly older gentleman who I've never met before, I'll say thank you, sir, and things like that. That again, but all this, you have to be comfortable. Don't try and fake it. Is what I mean. If you're not that, if your USP is that you're a bit of a you're a bit more casual. And like I said, I never wear a suit. Some people wear suits when they canvass. I never wear a suit at all. I don't get it, because my people who know me and think polo top, rugby top, that sort of thing. I mean, you want to be, for me, it's smart casual. Is that roughly where we're all at the same? M&S dad look is kind of what I go for when I'm canvassing. How about you, Sam?
I vary. I will just wear what I would normally wear. Like if it's boiling hot, I'll go out in shorts and a football shirt. I want to feel like me, and I want them to be thinking of me as a real human being. Yeah. And so I wear what I wear as a real human being. I just try and be myself as much as I can.
Absolutely. Alison, we've already heard that you just wear mountains of yellow. So
a bit like Sam, I reflect what I wear generally anyway, which is generally jeans and a top. I think women are judged more harshly for what they wear than men. Yeah. I got some photos done in the run-up to the general election in 2019 where I was wearing what I thought were a perfectly reasonable pair of what I call paper bag trousers, for those that are interested. And one of my friends overheard a lady in Sainsbury's going, and she's wearing those funny trousers with a drawstring on them. So I think as women, we need to think quite carefully about how we'll be.
Red. I'm amazed you're still in the party. You're all
down from my navy blue paper bag trousers. Yeah. So I think we do get judged more harshly, and people will form views about you based on what you look like. But I think the overriding thing is about being comfortable and dressing for the conditions. So when you're canvassing, there's quite a lot of standing still and not much walking, so you get cold. Hence my enormous duvet coat that's bright orange. Also, in terms of gloves, your hands get cold canvassing because you've got things in your hands and you've got minivan. So I've managed to I was asked for and got given for Christmas a pair of gloves with fingertips that work on a touch screen. And I tried them yesterday for the first time and they did actually work. So things like that just mean that you're warm and comfortable or not too hot in the summer, I think really help you keep going and kind of do a sustained canvassing session.
So Sam wants to come in. Go on then, Sam.
I just remembered the other thing. What are you wearing on your feet? Because you've got to have comfortable shoes. You're walking around for a couple of hours. I have specific leafleting and canvassing shoes that are just really comfortable ones.
Yeah. Likewise, I have some. I mean, I'm slightly awkward because I've got huge flat feet. So I've got size 12. So I have to. So whether it's running trainers or whatever, if someone's judging you just on your shoes, they're probably not going to vote for you anyway. It's kind of thing. Be comfortable. And if someone happens to mention it, say, I've been out for 2 hours, so I need to do it. And actually, they'll probably give you a level of kudos for doing it. Right. So we have got into the canvas now. We have asked them if there's any issues. 9 times out of 10, they'll usually say, no, we're all right, thanks. And I usually reply to that saying, oh, that's great. That's what we kind of want to hear. But at some point, we have to get on to voter ID. It is a clear, we're talking about gathering data, and I do it throughout the year, whether it is in the summer or whether it's, if they've just told you a heartbreaking bit of casework, say something like that, then going into, I'm really sorry that's happened to you, but you're thinking of voting for us? You've got to be sensible. Everything, you've got to be able to adapt on the doorstep, but at some point you want to try and figure out where they are aligned politically. Now, one thing where you can, again, soften it instead of just going, at the next local election, are you going to vote for me? It's very blunt, and people's brains don't work for that. And Liz Truss and the debacle at the government was almost a perfect example. Say, God, it's a right circus at the moment, isn't it, down in Westminster, or something like that. And then they will kind of lead, and they'll say, and if they say, bloody Tories, they should never be in again, actually, you've probably ruled out a particular party that they're probably not going to vote for as a way. And another way I do it is I say, do you normally vote in local elections or not? And that, I find that useful, even though I know, because I've got the marked registers, I know perfectly well if they don't do or don't, but my way is that just breaks it into them about, they can say, oh, I'm only really interested in national politics, but that's going a bit pear-shaped at the moment. How do you, Sam, break into getting the voter ID question into the conversation?
I will very much vary it according to the type of conversation that I've just had.
Yeah.
If somebody's really kind of like they're not backing away, but they've not really engaged, I'll probably be quite blunt about it and just kind of say, "Oh, yeah, do you mind me just asking who do you normally vote for?" Mm-hmm. But the other way, my much preferred way of doing it is to ask them a question like, "What's really important to you about that makes up your mind about who you vote for?" Because again, that's making it about them. What their important issues are is such a strong tell of who they're going to vote for. So it's useful information about what you're going to campaign about, but it's a real step into it. And if somebody tells you like sort of health service is really important to them, then I find it much easier to then step into, oh, well, what do you make of what's going on with things at the moment, and get them to have that bit of a conversation in, oh gosh, yes, the Tories are wrecking the NHS.
Before I bring Alison in, I just want to make one, I think this is really important because I've had, when you've got data, so we had canvassers who have been doing it for a very long time, really key that you don't make assumptions. You don't make assumptions that because the wife's voting one way, the husband must be voting the same way. You don't make an assumption that if they happen to be nice to you, does not mean they're going to vote for you. You have to get, just because they may think the NHS is in a complete and utter mess doesn't mean they're not Tory voters. You have to get some level of commitment from them to say one way or another. Sorry, Sam, I kind of broke you off mid-sentence there. Then I want to come to Alison.
But it's really important. It is that distinction between, so I've got the first bit of data, which is this is the important issue. And you can record, depending on what you've got set up, but you can just put it in the notes or whatever. But then you take that next step of going, so oh, right, okay, so you're really keen about the environment. Do you vote? We've got a really good green policy. Do you support us with that? I just step them through.
Yeah, Alison, how would you broach if they haven't given a clear? Because some residents will say, "Oh, brilliant, Lib Dems, I always vote for you," or something like that. Some do say that, but that's
when you're not getting that. I will tend to say, "Are the Lib Dems a party that you voted for in the past, or would you consider voting for us again in the future?" And then take it from there. And if they say, "Oh no, you're not for me," then I might take a wild assumption that this person might vote for one of the two main parties and say, so do you vote for the other one? So if I think they're a Conservative, I'll go, "Oh, is that because you support the Labour Party?" And that normally elicits a strong enough reaction to either confirm or not kind of what your assumption.
I do know one of our canvassers that does. Is there any party you wouldn't vote for? That is one, just to try and break that barrier. Even, we will get people, Sam, who say, yeah. I sometimes say, do you mind me asking who you voted for at the last election, or would you consider voting Lib Dem at the next election? And I'll say, that's private. How do you deal with that, Sam?
I tend to say, my first reaction is to say, that's fair enough. Absolutely. And I will then go, it depends how I've got to that point. If I asked it bluntly, I would then reverse my order from before and then go, so what's the most important thing for you when you're thinking about voting? If I'm not going to get the political intention, I want as much other data as I can.
The way I've done it, and this is it benefits that it's true. I kind of, because it can be it can add a level of awkwardness if you've asked someone to say that's private, that's between me and the ballot paper or something like that. I'll say completely understand. Absolute truth is my mum still doesn't tell me which way she votes, and that is actually true. My mum has never told me which way she votes, and it just kind of breaks that sign. And then to follow it up, you get over the kind of the community champion bit, and I say, and we have a philosophy, regardless how you vote, if you vote, our job's to be there for you. If you need anything at all, here's all my details on the canvas card. Do let us know. And that's how I kind of finish off in case it gets awkward. How have you ever dealt with people saying won't tell you their voter ID, Alison?
Much like that, to be honest with you. It's, okay. That's absolutely your right.
So my mum hasn't told you how she's voting either. That's good to know.
But yeah, you say that's absolutely fine. I understand, and say here's my contact details, and get in touch if I can help in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I want to ask you both a question. So when you come to your door, you're looking before you actually get to the door. You're saying, okay, it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith. There are two trains of thought as to whether or not you should look at their previous canvass results. So again, those that don't know, the minivan will tell you what kind of voter they are, whether it's a solid Lib Dem, so someone who said they're definitely voting Lib Dem 3 times or more. And again, we're not going to go into the nerd here. I'm just kind of breaking it up. Whether they are Lib Dem Tory inclined, Lib Dem Labour inclined, whether they have been all over the place. So the two rules of thought, Sam, are either you should go in blind and actually not go in with any assumptions in your head over how they might, in case that kind of alters the way you present things, or you use that data to be able to market yourself better. So if you know this person from previous conversation has always been Lib Dem or Labour, and Labour are the party you want to squeeze, they're in third place, and this is a Tory versus Lib Dem seat, do you use that data to push that squeeze message and tailor your canvassing towards that particular person?
I change according to what type of canvas I'm doing. So if I've got everybody in the electoral register, and particularly Alison mentioned where you're trying to get information out of people you've not got data about before, so I will, if I'm just doing a wide open canvas, I will not check. But if you are doing a specific canvas where you are trying to target kind of swing voters, then you absolutely have to know kind of where they are on the agenda, because you're really tailoring that conversation to what you know about them. I think the one thing I would pretty much do regardless is, because when it comes up in Minivan, you've kind of got a list of questions, you've got a notes section, and it depends on how well you use that notes section. But I will jot down not just casework in that notes section, but if I've had a chat with somebody and they've mentioned their cat's just died, or something like that, that is a hook for a future conversation. So I always go in and look at the notes rather than go in and look at the canvas data.
Alison, what about you?
I occasionally look at the canvas data. Maybe if somebody doesn't come to the door very quickly and I'm standing there wondering how long to wait. But generally I go in blind. And for us, for an awful lot of our patch, we don't have data in there anyway. So it's sometimes a bit unusual to find somebody with data.
So actually one of my deputy, one of my colleagues, goes in blind every time. I never go in blind. I always check every answer they've given before, because I like to have that reassurance behind me to say, oh, actually, so they were Lib Dem. Maybe they fell out with us a little bit in coalition and now have come back, or something like that. I like to have that when I go in. But it all depends on when you're canvassing, whether you feel comfortable having that in your brain. But also, if you do get the previous data, you don't want to come across like this big brother. Oh, that's interesting, because you said 2 years ago that you were thinking. You don't do that. Whatever this is basically for you to be able to tailor your message a little bit, to be able to see if they are still squeezable, or if they've maybe firmed up and now a solid Labour where previously they were Lib Dem Labour leaning, and and trying to figure out what buttons you can press subtly in the canvas. So I like having the data, but like we've heard from Sam, Alison and others, it is entirely up to you if you do that. Let's go to some of the things that come up again as people. What happens, Alison, if you don't know the answer to a question?
If you don't know the answer to a question, John, you say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, but if I can take your details, I'll get somebody to come back to you.
Perfect. Never blag it, Sam.
No. And again, it comes back to that, you need to be genuine. Because it stands out a mile. And that, relating back to what you said before about near an election time, like being genuine is actually being honest about the fact there's an election coming. It would be disingenuous to be avoiding mentioning there's an election coming. So yeah, if you don't know something, I will start hesitating. I will start reaching. It just sounds unnatural. It's really bad presentation. I will not engage with them properly. I'll stop making eye contact. I'll do all kinds of really bad body language things and verbal things, which will put people off me. Don't do it.
John?
Yeah, and I think when you sorry, Alison, when you go to other areas, so I've canvassed not just in parliamentary by-elections, but I've helped out people. They said, oh, that problem down at 269 Carter Street, and I think, you don't go, it's shocking. You just can't. You say, look, really sorry, I'm not from this area, etc. I'm helping out today. Just don't lie. If you blag it and you get caught out, you've lost that trust straight away. And the whole part of canvassing is trying to gain a bit of trust of that resident as well. Alison?
Yeah, also don't promise to fix things you have no capacity to fix.
Absolutely.
So the key example for me here is our high street in our village is a 18th century high street with 21st century traffic, and it's a nightmare. And the county council and the parish council spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on it a few years ago, and everybody thinks it made it worse, and nobody wants to go near fixing it. I'm a district councillor. The district council has nothing to do with highways, but it is the issue that comes up again and again. And so when I had a lady yesterday raise it, and I said, I'm not going to make you any false promises, that there is no appetite at the moment to try and fix it, and I'm not on the right council to kind of be leading on that, rather than set false expectations.
I wouldn't ever promise to fix anything for anyone. I just think it's a bad. I will always say I can start the ball rolling. This is what I can do. I will get in touch with this person, and this is what should happen next, and I will keep you informed. I would never say I would just because anything could happen to mean it doesn't happen. So I under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we get close to the general election, you'll find other bigger issues coming in. It won't just be the pothole politics. You'll start getting policy politics coming into it as well. Okay, what is the Lib Dem policy on increasing arms to Ukraine or whatever else? Some things that you might, and whatever topic comes up, there'll be someone who's really passionate about it or will know more than you. So again, never blag it. If you have an opinion on it, absolutely fine. I mean, I'm if you feel relatively comfortable doing it. If you don't feel comfortable at any point, just say, either you can say, I'm not sure. If they really determine that they want to know your opinion on it, you can say, well, that's interesting. I'll go look into that. Is a very simple one. Or again, make it about the person you're talking to. Oh, what's your opinions on it? That's interesting. What are your thoughts on the issue? That and then again, making it about them rather than about yourself. Go on, Alison.
Yeah, and I would say worrying about not knowing what the policy is and how to answer residents' questions is one of the key reasons I hear from our members about why they don't want to canvass. People are really worried about being caught out. And what I will always say to them is, you're not there to preach to the person on the doorstep. You're there to listen. You're there going with your ears is really what it's all about. It's not to try and sell our particular policy on any issue.
And sometimes you'll get moments, and I can only think there's this one chap, and I was having a really nice conversation with him. There was no problems at all, and I'd done the whole community politics thing. I'd figured out where his vote lay, and he was, Lib Dem supportive. And then he suddenly come out with an absolute line. He said, "You know what? Thank you so much for everything you do. We'll need more people like you in the coming war with the Muslims." And he was just like, "Where? What?" Kind of thing. And at that point, you can either want to, when we get onto bonkers and angry people, sometimes it is just walk away. And actually, I mean, Sam, you deal with people who have been aggressive in politics, shall we say. I would say that is very few and far between. I would say in all the doors I've knocked on, there's probably only about 5 people have then put into minivan, okay, just don't knock on this guy's door. He's clearly just a bit of a rager. The vast majority of people are absolutely delighted to see any politician take the interest and actually knock on their door because, politics is fairly weak in this country and there aren't a lot of people going out knocking on doors. But Sam, how do you deal with angry people?
Well, I mean, I'm really going to emphasise how few and far between. So my area is one of the most aggressive political areas in the country, if not the most. And yet, if I'm knocking on doors, talking to people, I don't get aggression almost without fail. You do get people who will push things from time. So about a week ago, I knocked on somebody's door and did my little opening spiel, and he was fine. And he just talked about where the council was spending money. Right, fine. And I asked went into, who do you normally vote for? And he didn't answer. So I then did it that way and said, so what's the important issues for you? And he went on to immigration, and he went really aggressively on immigration. Now, there's lots of different kind of ways in which you can respond on this. If you can and you have the time, bear in mind, and you have the time, that's a really important qualifier. A lot of the time you won't. You can have a conversation with them, even if they massively disagree with you. So he was talking about small boats. He was talking about not letting people into the country. He was talking about the impact of immigrants on trashing our town and the NHS and all of this. And I listened to it, and I didn't tell him I certainly didn't tell him he was wrong. If you're having a lengthy conversation with somebody, you can't just say you're wrong, I don't think. And I then asked him kind of, other feed-in questions. So I asked him about how does he feel about there used to be 3,000 children were allowed in sort of out of areas of sort of areas of violence. There was a refugee program for them, which got scrapped. And you know, are you happy for those people to come into the country? You know, what are your things that you are happy with about immigration? When could it work for you? And eventually we got to a point, and I think our ideas of what this are very different, but we agreed that, do you know what? Immigration isn't a bad thing, but the system is not fair.
Yeah.
And when we got to that bit of the conversation, and I said, so if we had an immigration system that you could see was fair, even if you didn't agree with all the details of it, would you be okay with that? And he said yes. And that was a conversation with somebody who, during that, had called people black bastards and, you know, really gone to places that I was very uncomfortable with. But yet, by letting him do that, giving him some feeding questions, I actually got to a point where he did feel connected with, and he did, like, I felt like I had an impact on how he thought about the subject. And you know, he's not changed his mind, but there's an opportunity there.
So we're going to talk on we're going to finish the episode talking about how long you should spend on the door. But we're going to keep on with this, Alison. So if you get someone who just doesn't like you or doesn't like the Lib Dems, how do you deal with that?
I try and keep the conversation as short as is polite. I'm not going to change their mind. Canvassing is only very, very rarely ever going to change somebody's lifelong voting intention. And so my time is probably better spent, and their time is probably better spent, not on the doorstep, but moving down the road to the person who does want to talk to me. But I'll always try and keep it polite. I think I always have done. I'm trying to work out how I've ever. No, I think I've always been polite. And you say, well, thank you for your time, and move on. But I don't think I've had one conversation quite a few years ago now with a very religious fundamentalist who was, I don't know, he had strange ideas about how the EU was some kind of religious cult. And I was like, whoa. This is a conversation I need to get out of. But it took me a few minutes to get him to shut up and get away.
I mean, there'll be moments. I mean, I've been re-elected and elected during both coalition and Brexit. So obviously, both things cause significant aggro towards the Lib Dems. And again, one thing you don't want to do is inflame it. I think it's really important because not only does it not help you, it will probably raise your stress levels and it's not going to solve the situation, but it actually can have a negative. So if someone says to you, you know, I'll never forgive you for what you did in coalition, you know, bloody yellow Tories or something like that. If you go back at them and say, well, you're a bit of an idiot, aren't you? Or something like that, all you're going to do is encourage that person might be raging to himself. He might not even vote. You're going to encourage him to probably get more proactive for your opposition. He might then go from being just a voter to putting up an opposition poster or getting active or doing something deliberately just to stop you winning. So kill with kindness is the way to go. You know, fair enough, mate. Have a nice day. We'll see you soon, or something like that. You don't need to engage with the hate. And the only other point I will say is that not everyone is having a good day when you knock on their door. You know, so there'll be times I've knocked on doors where people will go, you know, I just haven't got the time for this, and they'll close the door. Don't mark them down as being refused or something, because there's an option when you go into minivan of why you didn't get any sort of canvas data. Usually it's they're not home, or they've moved away, or they've died. And one of them is that they've refused, and that is for people, like I said, a couple of people where you've just said, I hate everything about you, or something like that. That is clearly a refuse. I'll never want to see a Lib Dem again. That is a refuse. If someone just says, I'm sorry, I'm really busy, I just don't have time, even if it's slightly blunt, that is not them saying they will never ever vote for you again. Again, don't make that assumption. And, you know, we've all had crap days. We've all had days where where things haven't gone wrong, the kids aren't behaving, your football team's just lost, or whatever. And you've got to, as a canvasser, just realise that not everyone's in a great place all the time, Sam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. All right, happy days. Right, great stuff. Okay, what the other hints we might want to get to is that if you're in your Canvas group, try and finish an area or try and make it sense. So don't leave halfway through a street or something like that. Do it in nice little blocks, you know, and so it's easy to keep tabs of where you're going. Again, when your data controller, if you have one, or your whoever's good on Connect, you can show off a map, and I do that with my teams. Okay, here's a map of where we've canvassed in Preston, and these are the areas we've done. Very useful. But if you start doing, I'm doing halfway down, halfway up a street or something like that, it just becomes awkward. Try and have a logic to your progression. And also for me, I tend to not just stay in one section. Oh, let's go to the nice Lib Dem areas, shall we? Just go here. Actually, pepper pot yourself around your ward or wherever you're trying to canvass. So you think, I saw him at the Wichita part of Cadley. I saw him on the Cadley Causeway part of Cadley. Get yourself around. Because again, even if you haven't knocked on that person's door, there'll be people that have seen you in and around all over the ward. So that's a good way of spreading yourself around. Any other little tips before we get on to how long we should talk to people, Sam?
Be aware of your own biases. Like, you know, you may have an instinct to I'm more anti-conservative, certainly on a values thing, than anti-Labour, and so I can't, like, if somebody's left leaning, I instinctively want to go, well, they're likely to like me more than somebody who is kind of slightly right leaning. But actually, and so I just need to be conscious of those kind of things when I'm having conversations. You know, don't put my own filter on the conversation I had with someone else.
Yeah,
really good point.
We've definitely got colleagues who we know believe that if they just spend the time talking to somebody, they'll change their mind after 50 years of voting for a certain party, and because somebody smiled kindly, they go down as a soft lib or a probable Lib Dem. Like, no, you need something more solid than that before you.
And that's why asking that voter ID question, however you get there, is so important. But actually, and a real fundamental, one of the things I learned during coalition in particular, was they don't have to agree with everything you stand for to vote for you. Really,
they shouldn't. They actively shouldn't. There's research on this. They should. Someone is more likely to vote for you if they disagree with about 20% of the things that you say than if they agree with everything you say.
We're stretching into nerd territory. He's starting.
We are. I'll stop it.
We are, but it is. But don't worry. So if they don't agree with it, so a classic example is if they're a Brexiteer, does not mean they are not going to vote Lib Dem for you. You know, you really have to get into the weeds of what their concerns were. They might have voted Brexit and regretted it. They might have voted for Brexit and still think on the balance it was still a right thing to do. That does not mean they don't agree with the other 80%, or using Sam's analogy, of what you believe in. And so, go on, Sam.
In my ward, a lot of people are swing voters between Liberal and UKIP.
Yeah, well, and you've just got to, and remember, people, and you get this argument on. We've had podcasts about this. People don't fit into your ready-made boxes of how you think voters should behave. I had a chap who I could knock on his door. He had a thick Scouse accent, saying he left the Labour Party because Tony Blair was too right-wing, but loves Boris Johnson and thinks they're on the right track. You know, there is no box that fits that man. But every single person's different. Right, we're going to end this because we've had a good long chat here, but we are going to end this on how long do we think people should talk about. And Sam, this is a geek warning. We're going to talk about whether deep canvassing and staying on there longer to get a more in-depth knowledge of people. I suppose, Alison, I'm going to come to you first, because surely it depends on where in the election cycle you are.
Well, it does. And it also depends on your personality. Maybe I should tell you about Colin and Nigel. Colin and Nigel are in my branch, and they're both absolute stalwarts and rocks of our branch. But Colin thinks that if you spend 15 minutes talking to somebody, you'll change their mind. And Nigel thinks that it should be a maximum of 2 minutes ever. It's like, good morning, Liberal Democrats. Who are you voting for? Thank you very much. And off he goes. And the problem of Colin and Nigel is if you ever pair them up to work on the same street together, Colin disappears down a driveway and has a long conversation, and Nigel steams ahead and then loses Colin. And then Nigel eventually finds Colin, and then they sort of have a row on the pavement about the fact that Colin spent 15 minutes talking to somebody. So my top tip is, if you have a Colin and a Nigel, don't put them working together in a pair.
But it's a balance between the two, isn't it, Sam?
Yes, and it's a balance on what your resources are. Like, I love long conversations with people, but you've just got a certain amount that you've got to get through. Don't, bear that in mind. I slap myself on the wrist from time to time and go, stop having those conversations. You need to be faster. So John mentioned deep canvassing, and that is a specific term. And that I'll recommend, there is a podcast on on people's psychology called "You Are Not So Smart," and they did an episode on deep canvassing. And if you want an introduction, rather than us nerding out here, go and listen, go and look up "You Are Not So Smart" and the episode on deep canvassing. And if you're interested in that kind of thing and how detailed conversations and longer conversations can work, go and listen to that. But in the meantime, you probably don't have the resources to do that. So don't do it very much, if at all.
And I think, again, you just have to be pragmatic when you're on the door. That if someone's dealing with a really pertinent, complex issue, are you going to sit to, I can't remember what's wrong, Colin's 2-minute rule? No, you're not. You are going to have to get into the weeds of that conversation and figure out what is. And the other thing about, if you do spend slightly longer on a particular topic, it will generally be really appropriate for lots of other people in that area. So if you're getting your head into a really pertinent topic, it will help you not only help that person, but also campaign for the local neighbourhood as well. I actually understand now all to do with the sewage system problems that are happening in such and such a place. And because you've got into it. But you do have to remember, though, as you get closer to the election, there will be some nefarious people that will just keep you on the door just because they want to annoy you. That's, who are never going to vote for you. And again, likewise, and this is, again, is when you do your targeting, as if you know by the time you're getting the run up to the election that you're just knocking to people that vote, you're able to filter out some of the people that are never going to vote anyway. So you've missed that, so you can miss those conversations. But generally, you've just got to play it by it. If it's a really pertinent topic and conversation, then stick with it for a bit longer. But as you're getting close to the election, it's about resource and how many man hours you've got, and you know that you need to speak to X amount of people to maybe get yourself over the line. And that ultimately is why canvassing is so important, because if you look at any of our big by-election wins, it's about that data we collect. We say, so if you need 1,000 votes to win your award, you're looking at maybe 1,500 people on your database in your ward that say they might or will vote Lib Dem. And then you know that a third of them won't. And that's the kind of level you want to get to, 150% of your data. And the best way of doing that is by going out and canvassing. And also, here's the other thing about I love canvassing as well, because if you do surveys, if you do social media, you are genuinely self-selecting your audience of people who want to respond to you. If someone's responding to a survey, they're half inclined to. If someone hates the Lib Dems, they're not going to respond to your survey. Well, sometimes they do and just say, sod off on them. But actually...
Which is good data.
Which is good data. Yeah, it's all... So I can tell you that I put it on my private Facebook Facebook profile yesterday. I got a chap who just texted me saying, I have and I've never will... No, so I never have... and I never will vote Lib Dem, Mr. X, because I just delivered a target letter to him. And on our database, he was down as a Tory Lib Dem kind of potential, what we call a soft Tory or a yellow Conservative. And actually, we hadn't spoke to him. Just so happens we hadn't actually found him in. We knocked on his door since 2016. And so that data was now so old. But I have a data. Mr. Such and Such is never going to vote for us. And he was very, very nice. He was saying he loves the fact the work we do in the community, but he's not going to vote for us. But that's all good data. It means that when we come on polling day, I'm not going to go knock on his door because it would be a waste of my time. And that's ultimately it. Right. Anything further from you, Alison or Sam? Anything you think we've missed? That was a very good session. I have kept you on quite long, actually. But anything further?
It's like deep podcasting rather than deep
Deep podcasting. Yeah, don't Google that. Don't Google that at all. Just, but no, it's thank you so much, Alison and Sam. And like we said to all people, if you have questions about it, if you're worried about it, by all means contact us. We are happy to chat this thing through, happy to give you any advice that we might have, and also, like I say, use other resources like the ALDC, like your regional party or the national party training that you've got. Because actually, I love canvassing. I think it keeps me grounded into where I need to be. But for some people, it can be quite a nervous thing. But if you need help, just let us know. And by all means, check out our Targeting 101 podcast. We're going to be doing more of these training sort of podcasts as well as we in the run up to the local elections and the general election coming up soon as well. But thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Do subscribe, do like and do comment. It all helps people find our podcast. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much, Alison. Always a pleasure. And we'll be back with another episode of the Lib Dem Podcast very soon.